the marketing guru of television himself, Jim Thomas,
There you go.
in the flesh.
What have been your favorite evolutions in the marketing space since you started? Do you have any like favorite things that you're like, ooh, that was a game changer for me?
I have loved benefit of looking back now on especially several milestones. 2007, obviously the smartphone came in and put power in everybody's hands, but we didn't really know what we had then as consumers and as marketers, because that hadn't matured at all yet. Social media was really young. But I think 2012, 24 to 2014, when people were starting to get their bandwidth was starting to become more widely spread, at least in the office, and people were starting to have more wants and needs. And then as social media kicked off in 2014 to about 2018, became much more valuable to people, and also much more valuable to brands, because they could talk to people one-on-one and learn about them, learn about their habits, learn about their consumption patterns. I mean, those are real milestones. And now with what you all are doing and others, tremendous opportunity.
Like, first off, everything he just said is 100% on Jim brand, right down to in 2007, the phone changed it. But here's the thing. You've been saying that since then. I've known you to say it since 2013 or 2012, whatever it is, when we started interacting. Jim has been my boss, mentor, friend, guy I annoy, all of these things. Like, Jim, you've been saying the same thing over and over. How hard is it? You've done the GM role, corporate marketing role. You've been a consultant who travels around for tons of stations. You have media publications that are using you right now as a marketer. How good is the TV industry, or old media, as you just called it, at learning how to not die?
Well, I think that the TV business is watching or has watched print. I mean, there was some cross ownership, limited cross ownership between print and broadcast, traditional broadcast companies, but for the most part, they were separate. But beginning to watch print slowly die and try to make a transition to digital, many broadcasters said, "Well, that's what we don't want to be. We don't want to allow the business to deteriorate, our relationship with consumers to deteriorate enough that they find us to be not valuable, irrelevant at worst, and maybe unnecessary, probably is the worst, because there's a want and need for news. I mean, we're talking on a fairly substantial worldwide news day today.
Yep.
That sees the first conflict in Europe since World War II. Pretty big day, and yet people still want news. It's just a matter of who they're going to get it from, and which is fragmented so much today. And again, back to my holding up the smartphone. I work with a client right now that 80% of the people who consume their news product do it on their smartphone. And that's a fundamental difference for having to build relationships with consumers today, and trying to find out how can I super serve them as a media company. And it's something that broadcasters really are not used to. I mean, broadcasters, I say we because I spent a lot of time there, used to be one voice to thousands, millions, if you were talking worldwide or a market-wide audience sometimes. And it wasn't that long ago that was really effective. And television stations still have viability. It's just you can't decide on a Monday that you're going to reset the attitude of a marketplace by starting an advertising campaign on Friday and expect it by Sunday, everybody knows about it. That just does not happen anymore.
I mean, so there's still arguments for reach and frequency and the need to consistently put a message in front of people, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's still lots of eyeballs watching television stations, but in the 90s, even early 2000s, you could conceivably find consumers out there who were watching not just television news, but the same station for television news 3 or 4 times a week. Same station at the same time.
Yep.
3 or 4 times a week. Today, if you ask consumers, well, how often do you watch local television news? They might say, I watch any station I can happen to be at a TV station for once a week or once a month. So loyalty is certainly not as highly valued by the consumer. It needs to be really valued by the broadcast and media companies, because that's how you're going to continue to have relationships with people. And consumers really have said that, it's a little bit of sameness out there.
What do you think, like, not meant to be a leading question, because I think we have this conversation a lot too, but like, what should news companies be doing? Like, especially traditional broadcasts, right? Because I think it's reasonable to suggest that, like, I don't know, there is still something to be said about like the behavior, even if it's just reflexive, to like, in times like this, to sit down, turn on the TV, sit down and tune into, whatever
Big
that
rectangle
brand is. But like, how do, outside of those like moments of like chaos, what should brands be doing, and what's the disconnect? Why, like, how do they get more of these people and build that brand loyalty so that, there's everyday viewership as opposed to just crisis viewership?
Sure. It's a serious challenge for organizations, media companies, and you see lots of people trying to aggregate consumers' loyalty across platforms. Find us on the mobile app we've built for you. Find us on our mobile website. Look for us on social media, and when you're available, come back to the traditional platform that you paid maybe $1,000 for and popped it on the wall. But the challenge is you have to constantly be learning more about your consumers and changing with their wants and needs, because they truly have the power now to decide when their news cycle starts in the morning. Are they going to watch that big flat panel on the wall, and usually it's this panel. They pick up their phone and they don't go to a news station. They go to probably a social media site or a chat that they have with 6 friends who they depend on or trust for keeping them informed on what's going on. I just opened my eyes, what's going on this morning, and their 6 friends are already chatting about it, and that's where their news cycle starts. I did a focus group not long ago, a few years back. We were specifically asking morning news viewers, what are you, when you get up in the morning, and these people said, first screen I look at is my mobile phone. And we said, so what do you look at? What are the apps you look at? And I distinctly remember one young gentleman, probably 25, 28 years old. He held up his phone and he said, I have 25 news apps in one folder, and that's where I start my news cycle. And he said, are the local stations in this particular market in there? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that's the first place I go. I go where I think the best news is. And so he had a pattern, obviously, and lots of people have those patterns. So building loyalty is going to be really important to broadcast, formerly core broadcast companies, now media companies that have to find consumers no matter where they are consuming news. In doing that, you have to learn more about them and do the things that it takes to please them on those platforms.
I think like the thing you're saying that I focus on is the loyalty to our product is gone, partially because we just sort of were okay with being the only thing there, and we thought that the loyalty would stay. We didn't up our loyalty game. We didn't give new metrics. We didn't, I mean, I'm not saying that new metrics haven't come out. I'm not saying that TV advertising is dumb if you don't use a flow code, but I am saying the metrics didn't line up. The promise to the people who are on the other side of it, it was more talking at, not talking to. Here's what I'm telling you, not here's what I'd like to give you. And I think, I mean, I think you're 100% right, but I think the loyalty part is a ball that our industry dropped. And thankfully we get to pick up again now. I mean, we've been talking since, gosh, I remember watching Chase Jarvis live when we were launching that, what was it? That micro site at that place we worked. And we were launching this microsite about marketing and all these things that we were going to do. And Chase Jarvis live, which is always recorded in black and white for some reason, and he was just talking to people about how to be better. And like, I think this is right around the time I became a big fan of Casey Neistat, but also Gary Vaynerchuk from VaynerMedia. And he talked about not understanding, and this is Gary's thing is like, I trade in being right all the time, right? Even in the long game.
Sure.
But, you know, in our loyalty, in our measurement, in how we deliver, have we lost something with GRP and impressions? You know better than I do because I've always been confused by it. But like, what's the lay of that land?
Well, GRPs were sort of the measurement that was available at the time, and for years and years and years, if you looked at the definition of what you were getting in that, either in that rating book, a physical book, or the online ratings, they were called audience estimates, and to the best of their ability, Nielsen, Arbitron for radio, but let's talk Nielsen for television. They were giving media companies, media buyers, ad agencies, consultants, the best sense they had for who and how many people were watching in a particular market, a particular program, or across the country, depending on how you wanted to slice it. Yeah. And for a long time, that was sufficient.
It made sense.
Okay.
It was a measurement system better than nothing.
That's right.
Better than a guess.
Yeah.
And there was some effectiveness. Like, it's not like someone said gross rating points are the way to go, and we just made it up. Like, people were advertising against gross rating points.
Right.
They were getting results.
Right.
It prioritized the show that they know were watched the most, but like, it just, we're past it. We're not past measuring in any given way that we can measure, but it feels like we have new ways to do that now. And
well, I think you're spot on. The challenge now is consumers are moving almost in real time, and businesses and media companies and media buyers, businesses who try to either buy or sell advertising to reach consumers, want to have the best data available that gives them a sense of what are consumers doing, how are they consuming media, and that's not the measurement of what's up here. That's the measurement of what they're actually doing. Yep. There's an argument certainly to be made. Spent too much time reading research to to realize, to not acknowledge that you have to also understand what people think that happens between their temples, but sometimes their behavior does not match up with what they think between their temples. So that's why businesses and organizations have to still develop a brand, still figure out what do they actually mean to consumers, and then how do you reach them? Reaching them is the challenge today, and that's where I see companies like Flowcode having a tremendous opportunity to help media companies, businesses understand what is that behavior point that people are using right now. Because you can have a meaning in between their temples, but if their behavior means that, well, you're not available when I need you, Mr. or Ms. News operator. So I'm going to watch the news on my smartphone from the next available, best information available at the real-time need that I have right now. And so that's the challenge I think that media companies face and businesses face in trying to understand, if I want to reach consumers and motivate them, because actually, I mean, motivating them to come into my business and buy something, or to come back around or consume my news content on any platform you pick it, they're going to have to figure out what are they doing and why are they doing it.
I mean, we were in this conversation earlier. I'm sure it's going to end up on the podcast where, what was Christopher saying, Megan? Like, I'm worried that everyone's going to just put a QR code on their spot.
Yeah, just that like we're going to end up desensitized to it.
But like the thing that gets me excited about it is not the QR code on the spot. It's, okay, we put this QR code here with an intention to do this and then this and then that. Like, we're going to market against them. We're going to bring them back to the big rectangle by pushing to the app we just got them to download it. I mean, there's a lot there, and it's not like we're going to unpack it right now. Maybe one of us should disagree just so that we have a contentious moment, but we don't need to.
No.
Well, I think the real challenge with putting a QR code on anything is you have to have the value proposition correct.
Yep.
Because otherwise I'm not scanning that code. And there was a lot of press recently about the 60 seconds of QR code in the Super Bowl, and I think I saw roughly about 40% of the people who saw it admitted that they scanned it.
Yep.
Humongous number.
Huge.
And so the challenge will be, can you ever do that a second time?
Right.
Because some people who scanned it came away and said, I'm disillusioned by my experience after that.
Yep.
And some people wanted the information and thought, okay, well, I didn't know how to even go to find Coinbase, and now I can. So that's the first thing. Back before you put the QR code on the screen is, what's the value that you're going to give to people in exchange for scanning that code? Because if it's doesn't meet their expectations, it's just like a newscast that doesn't have value when they show up. It's just like the app that crashes when people open it.
Yep.
If the value on the back end isn't right, then they won't be back to scan that QR code, especially if they know it's your brand. Nope, last time I went there, wasn't enough.
Which I guess brings us to the point of, shoot, you better make sure your QR provider is stable enough not to crash your site, or you should probably have like a nice branded content experience on it. There's a whole lot of, I could throw in a whole lot of Flowcode pitches here.
No, you're absolutely right, Megan. But those are the things that people are going to expect.
Well, it's all about user experience, and we're in this very interesting phase right now where it's like, okay, everybody's known what a QR code is, just kind of by default. Like, we've seen QR codes around and we understand, up until to a certain point, it was like, oh, okay, this is something vaguely technical and mechanical that has nothing to do with me. And then COVID happened and suddenly QR codes were everywhere. And now we're in the phase where it's like, okay, everybody knows what a code is, knows how to use it. And now it's the response of doing it on TV. And now is arguably the most important time of making sure that those QR experiences are positive, because this is still such a learning moment, and if people are, we're suddenly inundated with bad QR experiences, it's like, oh my gosh, what is that going to do to, the consumer experience around QR and TV? I don't know. I'm like interested in understanding that, because
I am too. I'm right there with you, because it's and it goes beyond, like you were describing, goes beyond that first experience, because clearly if you're a media company or any business and people were kind enough to scan your code because they have some interest in it, it's what you do with that next that can take a step toward loyalty, and then the third step and the fourth step and the fifth step, where each one of those interactions people feel like they're not being taken advantage of but getting value for it, and then that builds the awareness even higher of QR codes and what they can do for me as a consumer.
Do we want to just talk, Megan, you have the most recent experience with like consuming Gary V content.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, just in like the last day, what you've learned and what you thought was interesting about him and his approach. And then Jim, if you just want to talk about seeing him at South by Southwest and his change.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
I think the thing that really struck me so much, and I know that we touched on this earlier, so I'm sorry if this is just me repeating it, but he had this really powerful statement about like looking around and realizing as a content creator, like how much of what you put into the world is driven by your own ego, and like it's not necessarily about what's functional or what value you offer to the consumer, but a lot of the messaging that we put out is because we're not very good at taking ourselves out of our own shoes. And a lot of what he was saying in this content that I was reading earlier is, yeah, and I mean, it really just the idea that this puts so much of the emphasis on earning that viewership, and the idea that you have kind of this perfect storm of like needing to earn that viewership, needing to have good quality content, understanding the value to your people, and then like kind of practically using that information, using the information, if in this case it's that QR scan, using that information to continually optimize and kind of moving forward. And he had this phrasing about how up until this point with media, or up until like, I mean, I guess this is kind of the way that it resonated with me, is like up until this point with media, we've been kind of calling the score based on a made up set of rules, looking at things like Nielsen and ComScore and all of these measurement tools that I feel like have been a vague suggestion at best. And then you have the ego about the content creation and all of this. And then what, like, how are you even measuring this in any real sense of the word? And then, all of a sudden enter the concept of QR on TV, enter Flowcode, and you suddenly have the measurement tool that is literally, I mean, it is going to force creators to take the ego out of the equation, because people are either going to scan or they're not. You're going to immediately understand, again, that value of like, what is the value that we provide that encourages a user to engage, and changing the rules, making better decisions, being more efficient about where you're placing your money, about how you're buying media and all of this based on the results that you're getting. It's like a real world way of understanding people that are interacting with you, and like really holding brands and creators accountable for like what that experience is, and earning that viewership. I don't know, Nick, is that where you were? That's what I was like, that was really resonating with me with him.
I mean, that's just it. Like, we started this conversation, we're talking about how like we didn't change to keep the loyalty. And am I wrong, Jim? Gary V is all about adapt and evaluate in a way that I think the industry that we've worked in for a long time and actually care about and want to do well but he's been pretty consistent on that messaging.
Yeah, no question. I mean, he's living proof of it, because here's a person who, when when he stepped out from his family business in New Jersey and into I'd like, you know, he went in. He was a YouTuber before it was cool, with you know, wine TV, and that really got him to thinking, look, if I can grow this business, I can grow other businesses. And as I've watched him, you got to admire him, because he's evolved as well as consumers have evolved, and some of the media platforms and devices we talked about earlier. Gary V has just watching him. I mean, he's gone from I'm a brash, I have to break through because that's how I am, to I'm now listening and understanding more than I ever have in my life, because I'm getting data back. I'm getting feedback in real time from people. And today, I mean, you think about how in the last 4 or 5 years, Megan, you described it, you know, we were forced to really get efficient with QR codes if we wanted to eat in many cases during the pandemic. And so now, in addition to data that doesn't have to be looked at as that's an estimate, because you can actually have cold hard numbers of how many people, how many impressions did you have in the last day, last hour, last month, pick your topic, to something that like you all are working on, which is put a spot on or put a piece of content on inside a newscast, and you can find out in the last minute if people have interest in it. And then you're armed with, how are we going to reshape or shape our next message with the information we've just gathered.
It's real-time optimization for traditional media.
Yeah,
It's
really
just- It's really incredible.
Like the end all be, there's, I mean, just a couple thoughts. Like Gary V, first on TikTok, Gary V, first on YouTube, first on Facebook, still hasn't sold his Facebook stock, which Meta, whatever it's called, first on Instagram, and he's got serious receipts on saying how much the purchase of Instagram was undervalued at $1 billion, I think.
Oh,
and
tremendously
like,
undervalued.
he's still cashing in on that, and rightfully so. It's proved itself to be worth what it was bought for and more. But now my question is, can we convince Gary V to run television ads, because Flowcode is an option that makes it into a platform that suddenly gives the data he's been using in all those other places?
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly worth the conversation. I think it was Digiday. I was reading one of their publications earlier today, and they were talking in there about how brands are considering becoming, looking to find ways to create loyalty spaces for their consumers, because, you know, just like, if you think of it in a brick and mortar sense, people would walk into the Nike store many years ago, because that was a place they felt like there's comfort in there, because I know what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
And if you're creating a virtual environment, or the environment where people can now do that online, or with a scan, and they can you know, opt into an experience, that's a way for brands in the future, media or any other, to build a loyalty environment that they can foster and sustain, and have a community providing them that direct feedback that Gary V found as he dove wholeheartedly into the platforms that were developed. And it's amazing to me to watch how that brands are finding a way to think past even the next year, 2 years, 3 years, to look at it and say, we've got to start cultivating this audience, this consumer base, and treat them very kindly in giving them information, and treating them specially when they deserve it.
surprise and delight, right? Like there are these opportunities for like, I don't know. I think that's one of the things that I'm so in love with Flowcode about is like, you know, the tech, the concept is simple and elegant, right? Like
Mhm.
it makes sense.
Mhm.
QR on TV, great, love it. You know, the ability to have it be more than that scan, I think is really something that like I'm excited to see brands do more of
Right.
is like really like how do you know, because I think that's the other thing is like we're so surrounded by mobile experiences and everything is very like there still needs to be some level of differentiation even in this like new space. And I just the ability to like turn a scan into a game or into an enjoyable shoppable experience or like something like that. I just think there are so many opportunities for, you know, really creating a little bit of buzz around some of these kind of like, you know, looking at media in particular, you know, you have local news and it just seems kind of like stuffy and dusty because it's, you know, it's old media. But like the idea of it becoming like an exciting and interesting thing for like everybody is just such an exciting possibility.
We can,
Well, and people, I'm sorry, Nick, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, we can close it out on, like, we were very nice to Gary V, like in this, right? But he also a few years ago said that brands need to stay away from QR codes because too much room for trickery. We solved for that problem. Dude was wrong.
Well, thankfully he was wrong. And I think part of it was that happy accident, little pandemic came along and people had to learn to trust them to get food.
Yeah.
Or other types of services. And I mean, look, I'm sure that you all are just dreaming up other ways to use QR codes and how Flowcode will help brands and media companies use them going forward. But the thing for me always is it's not, it has to go beyond the scan.
Agreed.
You know, when I talk to anybody, media company or business, and you know, it's that whole experience. And you and I said this many times to businesses and all over the country, Nick, when we were consulting them, it's value. And you have to be specific about what it's going to be, what I'm going to get as a consumer. And it has to reflect the brand I already have. Again, what's my impression of you going in? And if I think that you're not, you know, it's a brand that doesn't bring that kind of experience, and you try to say, well, just if you scan this code, you're going to get it. I may not scan it because I don't have that point of reference. So there'll be some brand building in the future. There'll be some real-time study of how consumers are interacting with those brands. And I think there'll be some value created for both sides using QR codes.
Jim, if someone wants to make a spot using these methodologies that we're talking about, we don't make spots, but do you know anyone who helps in marketing efforts for businesses and
Yeah,
brands?
thanks. I could certainly help them with that. And you can reach out to me at JT@Jim Thomas Media, and we can have a conversation.
I think I have to ask what it was like to be Nick's boss is just, we can circle back to it. We don't have to do it right now, but gotta know.